Yesterday, at approximately 2:55 a.m., under the cover of darkness, Ukraine reportedly executed a coordinated strike targeting a critical logistics hub. This hub is believed to be part of the Dragon Route, an unofficial corridor facilitating trade between China and Russia. This network had become essential for Moscow as Western sanctions tightened and traditional trade channels crumbled. For China, it represented a quiet yet significant investment, an alternative lifeline to sustain its influence in Russia's war economy and secure energy exchanges, bypassing Western oversight. The scale of this event is considerable. The destruction of the corridor, valued by analysts at over $3 billion, not only halted supply chains, but also sent a clear signal to Beijing's trade apparatus. What had reportedly taken years of diplomacy, investment, and secrecy to construct, Ukrainian forces neutralized in a matter of hours. The strategic message was direct. Ukraine was not only defending its sovereignty, but was also capable of actively undermining the infrastructure that fuels the Russian war machine. To understand the gravity of this strike, we must first examine the background. Since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Moscow's dependency on Beijing has grown substantially. Faced with severe sanctions from the United States, the European Union, and their allies, Russia turned eastward. China, in turn, saw an opportunity, not just to aid a partner, but to expand its influence through trade corridors and infrastructure projects. This trade route, sometimes referred to as the Northern Economic Passage, was described by observers as the spine of a shadow economy. It reportedly allowed Russia to sustain its military-industrial complex as Western restrictions deepened. Through this network, Russia is believed to have imported drone components, fuel additives, electronic chips, and heavy machinery, bridging the gap between sanctions and survival. For Beijing, this was also part of a long-term vision, linked to its Belt and Road Initiative, to establish itself as an indispensable trade intermediary. The route was intended to solidify Russia's role as a stable land bridge connecting Asia to Europe. But Ukraine, armed with precise intelligence, identified a key vulnerability. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and local reconnaissance reportedly pointed to a cluster of depots, rail junctions, and bridges in a narrow transit corridor. It was there in the early hours of the morning that Ukraine struck. Explosions were documented, destroying a multi-billion-dollar network of warehouses and fuel terminals, and exposing the vulnerabilities of this extensive overreach. Intelligence sources indicate the operation was remarkably fast, with only a few hours elapsing between the final planning and its execution. This suggests a high level of operational readiness and data integration between Ukrainian and Allied intelligence networks. Western officials have reportedly confirmed that while the operation was planned and executed by Ukraine, the targeting data was refined through cooperative satellite reconnaissance and analytics. This strike appears to signal a new phase in Ukraine's strategy. While Kyiv's focus has often been on defending territory, its operational philosophy has evolved to target the logistical veins of Russia's war economy. This surgical approach, targeting systems rather than relying on brute force confrontation, mirrors the 2023 campaign, where Ukraine systematically dismantled the land bridge Russia had established to connect Crimea. This focus on logistics and supply lines is a classic military strategy, seen in conflicts from World War II railway bombings to more recent strikes on supply routes in the Middle East. In the immediate aftermath, Moscow's Ministry of Transport attempted to contain the narrative. Russian state media initially portrayed the event as a minor logistical disruption. However, satellite imagery and online footage soon offered a different perspective. Entire sections of the rail system connecting eastern Russia to its central hubs were clearly damaged. The footage showed freight trains heavily damaged, depots in flames, and fuel reservoirs destroyed. Analysts estimated that it would take months, perhaps longer, to rebuild even a fraction of what was lost. The damage was not just physical, it was strategic. This route was reportedly vital for importing industrial components essential to Russia's defense sector, such as turbine blades, vehicle electronics, and high-performance alloys. Hundreds of freight containers bound for Moscow were stranded, and internal transport costs reportedly tripled overnight. With one coordinated strike, Ukraine did not just sever a supply line. It challenged the perception that Russia could indefinitely sustain its war effort by pivoting eastward. For Beijing, the implications were also significant. Official state-run media outlets in China initially avoided reporting the incident. The route had been quietly supporting trade flows that the Chinese government could not officially acknowledge, a form of silent collaboration that now faced public exposure. Reports indicated over 40 Chinese companies had ongoing contracts tied to the destroyed corridor, many structured under dual-use agreements. Analysts noted a sudden drop in energy futures connected to Chinese state companies involved in Russian contracts. Behind closed doors, discussions reportedly began about recalibrating China's exposure to Russian logistics projects, an implicit acknowledgement of the vulnerability. The reverberations also spread through Russia's allied network. Countries that had quietly supported Moscow's trade rerouting, such as Belarus and Kazakhstan, began reassessing their exposure. For Belarus, whose railways had been instrumental, it represented a financial complication. Kazakhstan, which had hosted intermediary firms, faced new scrutiny. This operation did more than just halt trade. It directly challenged the narrative of Russian resilience. For months, Moscow had projected an image of adapting to sanctions. This strike exposed the depth of Russia's dependence on external inputs and Chinese infrastructure. Symbolically, the event challenged Russia's long-held identity as a bridge between East and West. For the first time in modern history, Russia found itself economically cornered, unable to guarantee secure transit. It was a moment of geopolitical inversion, where the very geography that once empowered Moscow now constrained it. This also marked a shift in the perception of Ukraine's military capability. The precision, timing, and scale of this operation demonstrated a high level of coordination. In intelligence circles, Ukraine is now viewed not just as a recipient of support, but as a capable partner in shaping strategic outcomes. From a broader perspective, this single night's operation encapsulated the modern nature of warfare, where precision intelligence and economic insight can redefine geopolitical dynamics. In Washington, policymakers reportedly interpreted the event as proof of strategic maturity. In Brussels, EU officials convened to assess the aftershocks, viewing the event as confirmation that sanctions on Russia were achieving their intended effect. Perhaps the most profound reactions came from Asia. In Beijing, analysts began to question the sustainability of the no-limits partnership with Moscow. The destruction forced a recalibration. In India, observers noted it as a masterclass in asymmetric strategy and a warning about over-reliance on any single geopolitical route. The strike also unveiled the architecture of hidden alliances, the quiet trade flows and covert ties that had kept Russia afloat. By exposing these networks, Ukraine illuminated them. This transparency may become a form of deterrence in itself, as nations and corporations once willing to operate in the shadows of sanctioned trade now face global scrutiny. In Kyiv, the atmosphere was reportedly quiet but resolute. Ukrainian officials framed the success not as an act of aggression, but as a disciplined strategic defense, a necessary step to disrupt supply lines feeding the war. President Volodymyr Zelensky's evening address hinted at this broader shift. When the roots of war stretch beyond our borders, we will not allow them to grow unchecked. For historians, this event will likely be remembered not just for the explosion, but for what it symbolized: the exposure of dependence and the impact of precision on logistics. The $3 billion corridor is gone, erased in hours. With it, the perception that power could be secured through hidden trade has been significantly weakened. As the dust settles, several questions remain. What new corridors will China and Russia now attempt to establish? What defensive measures will Moscow adopt to protect its remaining logistical arteries? And what does this strike mean for the future of global sanction regimes, now that their vulnerabilities have been so clearly demonstrated? The neutralization of this corridor marks a significant turning point. It demonstrates that modern warfare is increasingly fought, not just on battlefields, but within the complex networks of global logistics. This event challenges old alliances and forces a mandatory recalculation of strategic risk for all nations involved. To stay informed on these critical geopolitical shifts and to better understand the strategies shaping our world, subscribe to our channel for continued in-depth analysis.